Hispanics are America's largest and fastest growing ethnic group. The U.S. Hispanic population rose 43% from 2000 to 2010, and Latinos now make up 1/6 of the nation. Hispanics are underrepresented in the electorate, but their political influence is only expected to grow. Hispanics in Oklahoma is the big topic today on Oklahoma Forum. There are more than 51 million Hispanics in the United States, and almost half of them are eligible voters. That's 11% of the voting population. About 332,000 Hispanics reside in Oklahoma, and although they are a small voting bloc, their impact on Oklahoma's economy and culture is unmistakable. Joining us to talk about the rise of Hispanics in Oklahoma are Ron Jackson Jr., staff reporter for Oklahoma Watch, and Giovanni Perry of the League of United Latin American Citizens. Thanks for joining us on Oklahoma Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron, you've done a lot of reporting on Hispanics in Oklahoma, especially recently. Where is the population growth occurring?
Well, the main one obviously is Guyman. I mean, there's over 50-something% of the population there that's Hispanic. It's totally transformed that whole community, which was once dying on a vine, and now it's probably, of all the small towns across the state, considered kind of a boom town. Other places I've visited where I've seen a large spike in the Hispanic population is Hennessy over in Kingfisher County, and in LaFleur County, a town called Heavener. But the populations there are respectively about 28, 42%. But if you talk to people on the ground, people that live there, they both towns say there's probably at least half the population is Hispanic. So the hard numbers that you're getting officially are very different from what you're hearing down at City Hall.
We're also seeing growth in western and southwestern Oklahoma, Sayre, Elk City, down around Altus, also a growing Hispanic population.
Right. There's it's really kind of all across the board. I mean, you can find pockets of Hispanic population from the west all the way to the east, depending on where you're looking.
Giovanni, what is attracting Hispanics to Oklahoma?
Well, the numbers that you just talked about coincide with what originally has attracted Hispanics to Oklahoma, which is like migrant farm workers coming in to farm, working on the ranches, out in the rural areas. But generally also, Oklahoma has a good way of life. It fits in with what a lot of since the majority of the Hispanic population comes from Mexico, this is a lot like Mexico in the region, in the weather, and then they also have family members that are already here, so they feel somewhat welcome. Except until the last few recent years, they haven't felt that welcome.
It's doubled, the population has, in about the last 10 years. That's a rather dramatic increase.
Yes, well, business, of course, also brings the Hispanics here. They need their workers in the factories, the meat processing plants, and the chicken processing plants down in the eastern Oklahoma. So that has brought the need for that kind of labor has brought in Hispanics to live in those areas.
You mentioned the environment in Oklahoma. In 2007, Oklahoma signed into law a challenge law, House Bill 1804. How has that affected the Hispanic population and Hispanic communities in Oklahoma?
Well, that had a great impact. Around that time, actually 1804 had been proposed the previous year, and it had united the Hispanic community in Oklahoma fighting against it. And there were a lot of other people who were against 1804, not just Hispanics. So in 2006, they were able to fight it off, but in 2007, they were not successful. Once that actually came into effect, or actually even before it was in effect, people were scared. And lots of people started leaving, and you saw the impact in construction work, building houses, the hotel industry, because it wasn't just the meat processing plants that was using that type of labor. There were many of other industries that use their labor.
Ron, what have you seen?
Well, exactly what she's saying. I have a situation that I covered at that time. I went down to a little town down around Altus. They had a cotton gin. There was about 24 workers there, and I interviewed the manager. And in the aftermath of 1804, that place was vacant because they were all Hispanic workers. They all had papers, but the feeling was that they were, truly undocumented. And the point is that this guy couldn't find anybody to replace, to put in there. I mean, basically the cotton gin shut down because they could only find a couple people locally that would work that kind of labor and for those kinds of wages. And it was really interesting how, as she said, people just vanished, and all of a sudden, and what had happened, I think, is as time went on, people started coming back as they started feeling more comfortable, knowing that it wasn't going to be, INS wasn't going to be beating down your door.
Do you see Hispanics becoming more comfortable now in Oklahoma than they were just a few years ago?
Somewhat, I do. They kind of learn to live within the system, and it's not just the Hispanic community, but also the Oklahoma community learns how to respond, and where they see a need for the Latino community to be here. And when 1804 gave them a chance to experience what it was like without a whole bunch of families. Even the schools had problems after 1804 with a lot of families pulling out their children from school. That affected the federal funding received for those schools. So the ripple effect was great. Now I think they're getting back to a little bit more normalcy.
A report indicated a few years ago that Oklahoma would lose about $1.8 billion if 50,000 illegal immigrants left the state. How many illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants are you seeing that have left Oklahoma in the last few years? Any idea?
I think the ones that have left have come back and then some. That's been my experience in visiting with different communities and different people, is that the ones that did leave had come back, and even more so. That's what I've seen.
That's been my experience too.
Ron, let's talk about a couple of communities that you have written extensively on, Heavener and Hennessy. And they seem to be a tale of two cities.
Correct. Yeah.
Tell us first about what you found in Hennessy.
Hennessy, I spent several days there, and I basically just wanted to immerse myself in the community, get to know people, kind of see what the dynamics of the community was. The official census records on that, it's about 28% is Hispanic. So it's about 600 people, in a town of about 1,400. I found out right away that those numbers are challenged, especially if you go down to City Hall, you talk to some of the people down there that deal with the water meters and such. They place that number closer to 50%. But what's interesting is that if you around time of graduation, you pick up the local newspaper, you find out that half the valedictorians are Hispanic. You look at their state championship football team, a lot of their star players were Hispanic. And while not everybody in the community is accepting of the Hispanic citizens there, I think the majority of the people there have found it to be, they're kind of dealing with it now, and they're kind of accepting it more and more. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that, I work with Joe, and I know Joe as a good guy, and so there's kind of that small town, whereas if you're in a big city, maybe some of that doesn't happen. But that's what I've found there. And what's interesting in Hennessy, too, is that they feel comfortable within that community, the Hispanic people, but they will not go to Enid. A lot of them won't even go to Enid because they feel threatened, and that's 15 miles up the road. So that just kind of shows you the difference of where they feel comfortable and where maybe they don't.
What about Heavener?
Heavener's a totally different situation, and I think one of the differences is that in Hennessy there's been kind of this slow progression where the Hispanic population's kind of risen. Over in Heavener, it's been more of a spike, and I think there's been a lot of anger, a lot of resistance to that spike over there. I met 2 police officers who worked over there who had resigned because they weren't allowed to handle the Hispanic population the way they wanted to, you know, when they pulled them over and questioned them and that sort of thing. So there is a lot of tension over there. They have a chicken processing plant and a hatchery down there that's kind of been the main source of income down there.
And Heavener is about 41% Hispanic.
Yeah, and again, if you talk to people there on both sides of the issue, they'll tell you that those are low. That's probably a low number.
Giovanni Perry, is that something that you see, that in communities where Hispanics enter, that there's resistance, and in some that resistance may continue, but more often perhaps it's like Hennessy, that at some point the resistance gives way to a certain level of acceptance?
Yes, what I've seen, sometimes it's a bit of a roller coaster ride for some of the towns as they experience some of the influx, especially out west. You know, there are some towns that were it not for the new Hispanic residents that they have, the town might be a ghost town at this point. They need those workers there to keep the towns alive. So I think that some of the local people feel happy and glad to have new workers and a new influx of economic development. But then, as always with any new population, you might have an increase in crime, or you might have some culture clashes, which causes some tension in the community. So as they experience that, then they kind of go down. But then, you know, the business that hires them tries to assimilate the workers into their community. So that's why I say a bit of a roller coaster ride for some of them.
Are the dynamics different in large metropolitan areas as opposed to rural areas?
What do you think?
I think so. Like Ron said, it's a little less personal in the metropolitan areas, and in the rural areas, you know, you're working with them side by side. Their family becomes your family. I know that I had a lot of clients. I'm an immigration attorney, and I had a lot of farmers and ranchers call me and say, "What can I do for this worker? I want to make them legal." And unfortunately, there are no options. There's just nothing available at this time.
Ron, what about you? Do you see a difference between larger communities and smaller?
I think it kind of goes back to what Giovanni was saying about maybe more of the similarities with Mexico. You know, I imagine small villages and towns down there are probably a lot like the small towns we have here. I've been told that a lot of the families that I've met, you know, they have barbecues, and it's almost like a block party, you know, and it's just a social element that they enjoy. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and you get to know people on a personal level, you know.
Proponents of tougher immigration laws point to the strain that the influx of immigrants, mostly Mexicans in Oklahoma, has placed on public services. Is that what you're hearing when you hear people, for instance, in Heavener objecting? Is that what you're hearing, or is there something else at play?
I think there's a lot of anger out there. That's what's out there, is anger. And I think, you know, look, you know, a lot of people who are angry want these folks to be documented, the ones that are undocumented. And I get that and I understand that. But you know what? They want to be documented too, you know. I think the big myth here is that they're taking jobs. Take Heavener, for example. They brought in this big plant in the late 80s, and everybody was excited about it because it was bringing employment to the area. And people went and signed up and got hired and went to work. And I had lifelong residents of Heavener tell me, guess what happened after that? A lot of people quit because the work was too hard. They didn't want it. So it created this vacuum. And you know, there were a lot of families that migrated here that were happy to fill that vacuum. So that's kind of what I'm seeing out there.
Giovanni, are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, I see that. I see that too. That's why when the people leave because of fear or whatever reason, the tension in the community, that's when the community that has already had a population of Latinos working in it suddenly realizes that this was a necessary, a needed part of the community. And so that's when I usually see when they start to work towards some action to help everybody be happy and get along.
Guyman is the poster child for that one.
Absolutely.
Guyman is. I remember interviewing a gentleman who his family had a appliance store downtown Guyman for, I don't know, 100 years. I mean, it had been there for a long time. That town was dying on a vine. And all of a sudden, these new migrant workers are coming and living there, and they're buying refrigerators and they're buying washers and dryers, and that guy's still in business. In fact, his business is thriving today. And so if you ask that guy, he probably has a little different take.
Well, the mayor of Guyman actually instituted an advisory council, a Hispanic advisory council, and he brought in Hispanic leaders in their community to ask and deal with the issues and problems that the Latinos might be having in the community. And I think that worked wonders for helping the relations in that community and help them grow.
Ron mentioned that the undocumented would like to be documented. You help some of those people get documented.
Yes.
What do they tell you about the objections that they hear to being here in Oklahoma, and what do they see as the best solution?
Well, yes, they tell me that they try to stay out of trouble. They want to be under the radar. They just want to find a job. They want to support their families, have their children in school, basically buy into the American dream, just like the rest of us. But whenever they feel, I don't know, I guess picked on might be the word. If they go into a certain town, and in that town you're more likely to be stopped and pulled over for a traffic violation, then they have to stay away from that town. They go on to another town, kind of avoid that one. So they kind of learn how to get along and do the best they can to support their family. And because yes, every one of them wants to find a way to legalize their status. And so many times I'm forced to give them the bad news that there is no way to do that.
How would they like to see that done? The Pew Hispanic Research Center indicates that the vast majority of undocumented immigrants, and certainly immigrants that come to the United States and Oklahoma, would like to see some kind of a path to citizenship. What do they think should be done?
I can give you a great anecdote there. I went 2 years ago. I did a story on, because this whole issue of they should do it legally. I went to the State Department website and looked at applicants, that they were reviewing at that time. This was 2 years ago. They were reviewing applicants from October of '93. That's how archaic our system is, and that's how backlogged everything is. So, I think you need to lock these politicians in a room and have an honest discussion about what's going on here. That should be fixed, because the issues I hear, the number one issue is that they're taking jobs. They're taking jobs. I hear that in every community I go to. And I think that's a bit of a mythology. Just based on what I've been able to see. So if you need the workers and they need to be here on some level, then there needs to be some comprehensive immigration reform.
Right, and absolutely something that a lot of people don't understand is that there is a quota system on the visas. And so even for family-based immigration, they're separated into categories based on what country they're from. So you have Mexico, India, China, and then the rest of the Philippines and the rest of the world, the worldwide category. And so each one gets a specific limited number of visas. And every year there are more applications than there are visas available, and that's what causes the backlog. And so then you have, let's say, for example, the son or daughter of a legal permanent resident who's trying to get his children to come over here to the United States legally. Well, if it so happens that that child turns 21 and didn't get in under the, before he turned 21, he goes into the next category, which then causes maybe like a 20-year backlog. So you can imagine being separated from your family that way. You have part of your family here, and then a son or daughter is stuck in the other country.
Research indicates there are about 7,300 different Hispanic-owned businesses in Oklahoma, and that Hispanics have about $6.2 billion in buying power. 9% of the population in Oklahoma is Hispanic. That's the largest minority group in the state. But only about 4% vote. Why do you think that is? Is it because there is a large undocumented immigrant population, or some other reason that more Hispanics don't vote?
Well, I think that it's not just because part of that group is undocumented. Even the group that is already has made themselves U.S. citizens, they're not registering to vote. I think some of that stems from the problems in their home countries, where they didn't have those freedoms, or they have maybe a cynicism about the system, like their vote doesn't count, or why bother, because it doesn't matter anyways. And so I think we suffer from that here in the United States in general, not just Latinos. So if we could find a way to convince people that their vote does matter, maybe that would also reach Latinos.
What issues, Ron, do you see as being most important to Latinos?
Well, I mean, just from the families that I've visited with, I think family issues. I mean, a lot of people kind of assume that it's immigration, and don't get me wrong, I think that's a big issue to a lot of Hispanic families, but I think they're just as interested in the economy. I think they're just as interested in women's health care, different things like that. Education. They're really big on education. I mean, that's because that's something, and we take it for granted here. But that is something I've heard from almost every family that has come here illegally, is that they want to get their kids an education, and they find it such a blessing that they can get an education, because they couldn't get it in Mexico. They had to pay.
Indeed, the Pew Hispanic Research Center has found that the top 3 issues for Hispanics in this election year are jobs, education, and health care, consistent with just about everybody else in the population.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's not a surprise.
No, it's not.
However, the Latino population is more interested in immigration, much more interested in immigration than other ethnic populations. And they're more likely to support Democrats, although other research indicates that about 54% of Latinos are much more ideologically conservative than other groups. Why do you think there's a disconnect? Do you see any rationale behind that kind of an apparent disconnect?
I think their hesitance to join a political party is the same reason they're not voting, is because they don't feel that their voice matters or counts. They're not going to listen to them, so why bother? Those groups do whatever they want to, whatever the Latinos say. But if they would participate in the process, and I think they need some education in that area. They don't know how to participate in that process. But once they get that, I don't think the Latinos realize the power that they could have if they actually all joined together and started voting as a group.
I've noticed a generational thing. Some of the older folks that I've met that received amnesty under Reagan, they'll be voting Republican until they die. They're loyal Republicans. The newer generation, I think, is really put off by a lot of this kind of angry talk that you see in the Tea Party and the Republican side of things. And I think that's really a turnoff for a lot of the younger voters. I don't know if, like Giovanni's saying, I don't know if they know how to express that. as far as registering to vote and being active, or do they feel disenfranchised? I don't know. I'd be guessing on
There's
that.
so many families that are of split status, so to speak. There are some families have U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, and undocumented family members. And so, because any combination of that legal status can be in any family, then that's why immigration becomes such an important issue for the Hispanic community. And I think that they will have a long memory for how they're being treated and which party is coming forward to help them.
Well, and campaigns and political scientists certainly will be looking at that over the next many years, actually, as this becomes a much bigger segment of the population. By a ratio of more than 3-to-1, Hispanics seem to support President Obama over Governor Romney. However, about 60% of Latinos are not happy at all with the deportation practices, the increased deportation under the Obama administration. Do you see that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
And before the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or what they called the DREAM Act, which isn't really the DREAM Act, but before that was announced by President Obama, I heard many Hispanics saying President Obama did not keep his promise on immigration, and they were disillusioned with him, and I don't know that they would vote for him. But once he instituted that policy and used the executive power to do that, I think he changed a lot of minds.
That's going to have to be the final word. Thank you very much for joining us today, Ron Jackson Jr., Giovanni Perry. Good to have you on Oklahoma Forum.
Thank you.
If you have a question, comment, or suggestion about a topic you'd like to see covered on Oklahoma Forum, let us know by email at forum@oeta.tv. You can also contact us and follow us on Twitter. Videos of Oklahoma Forum programs are available on our website and on iTunes. You can find extra information on the Oklahoma Forum website and become an Oklahoma Forum fan on Facebook. Until next time, I'm Dick Pryor, and that's Oklahoma Forum.